I never imagined I'd be sharing the most humiliating moment of my life. But here we are. I suppose part of me needs to get this off my chest, because if I keep it bottled up, I'll probably lose what's left of my sanity. So, buckle up, because this is one wild ride, and I promise you'll be as shocked as I was. My name is Nick, and I've been married to Laura for 8 years. Or at least, I thought I was. We weren't perfect, who is, but I always believed we had something real. I worked long hours as a software engineer, pulling overtime to make sure she had the lifestyle she deserved. Laura, on the other hand, spent her days enjoying yoga classes, brunches with friends, and shopping trips that somehow always ended with her maxing out my credit card. I never minded, though. She'd smile at me with those big green eyes and say, "You're the best, babe," and I'd think, it's all worth it. Then came the night everything changed. It was a Friday, I remember, because I'd planned a surprise for her, a weekend getaway to the cabin we used to visit when we first got married. I wanted to rekindle the spark, bring us back to those early days when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. I picked up some wine, packed her favorite blanket, and even made a playlist of all the songs we used to love. I was nervous but excited. When I got home, though, Laura wasn't there. I called her, and she picked up on the third ring, sounding flustered. "Oh, hey, I'm out with Vanessa," she said, dropping the name of her best friend. "We're having a girls' night. Don't wait up, okay?" A girls' night, of course. I didn't think much of it at first. Laura often went out with Vanessa, but something about her tone felt off. She was rushing her words, like she wanted to get off the phone as quickly as possible. Still, I brushed it off. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. After all, she was my wife. I trusted her. But then fate, or maybe karma, decided to step in. About an hour later, I got a text from a buddy of mine, Jeff. "Hey man, you busy? Just saw Laura at Mario's with some dude. Thought you should know." My heart stopped. Mario's was a cozy Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place couples went for romantic dinners. Jeff wouldn't lie about something like that, but I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. So I did what any desperate, lovesick fool would do. I grabbed my car keys and drove straight there. When I arrived, I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, my heart pounding in my chest. The place was packed, but it didn't take long to spot her. There she was, sitting in a dimly lit corner booth, laughing and leaning into a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed, with that cocky, self-assured smile that made my blood boil. Laura looked happy, happier than I'd seen her in months. I stood there, frozen, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. Part of me wanted to storm over and make a scene, but the other part, maybe the smarter part, wanted to see how far this would go. So I waited. I watched. And the longer I stood there, the more my world crumbled. They were touching, holding hands across the table, her fingers brushing against his. At one point, he leaned in and whispered something in her ear, and she laughed, her head tilting back like he was the funniest guy on earth. It was the kind of laugh she used to reserve for me. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a quick peck or a friendly goodbye. It was the kind of kiss that leaves no room for doubt, the kind of kiss that says, "You're mine." I felt sick. My legs were shaking, my vision blurred, but somehow I managed to walk inside. I didn't care about making a scene anymore. All I cared about was confronting her, letting her know I wasn't the fool she took me for. I walked up to their table, and when Laura saw me, her face went pale. She pulled her hand away from his like a kid caught stealing candy, but it was too late. The damage was done. "Nick," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here?" I didn't say a word. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wedding ring, and placed it on the table between them. Her lover, the smug bastard, just sat there smirking, like this was some kind of game. "I thought I'd give this to you," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "since you clearly don't think it means anything anymore." And with that, I turned and walked out. But that's not the end of the story. Not even close. What happened next will shock you more than you can imagine. When I walked out of Mario's that night, I felt like I was in a daze. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, but it wasn't enough to wake me from the nightmare I'd just stepped into. My mind was racing, replaying the scene over and over. The kiss, her laugh, the way she looked at him like he was the only man in the world. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How had I missed the signs? How long had this been going on? And more importantly, who was that guy? I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. 1,000 emotions churned inside me: rage, betrayal, humiliation. But above all, there was this crushing sense of loss. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd built my life around, was a stranger to me now. I knew I couldn't go home. Not yet. Not with all this swirling in my head. So I did the only thing I could think of. I called Jeff. "Hey man," I said, my voice shaking. "Can I come over? I need to talk." Jeff didn't ask any questions. He just told me to come by. When I got to his place, he had a beer waiting for me, and we sat on his back porch in silence for a while. Finally, I told him everything. What I'd seen, what I'd done. He listened, nodding occasionally, his expression a mix of sympathy and disbelief. "Nick," he said after I'd finished, "I hate to say it, but this probably wasn't a one-time thing. If she's that comfortable being out in public with this guy, it's been going on for a while." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but deep down, I knew he was right. Laura wasn't the type to take risks. If she was bold enough to meet her lover at a busy restaurant, then this wasn't something new. This was a relationship. That thought alone nearly broke me. "Do you know who he is?" Jeff asked. "No," I said. "I've never seen him before." "Well, maybe it's time you find out." The idea of digging into Laura's betrayal felt like pouring salt on an open wound, but I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. If I was going to confront her, I needed all the facts. So the next morning, while Laura was still asleep, I started looking. Her phone was the first place I checked. She was careless, leaving it on the kitchen counter like she had nothing to hide. It was locked, of course, but I knew her passcode. It was our wedding anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. I scrolled through her messages, my hands trembling with every swipe. Most of them were mundane chats with friends, reminders from her yoga instructor, but then I found a thread labeled M. My stomach dropped. The messages were explicit, to say the least. She called him baby and love, and sent him photos that made me want to throw up. But what hurt the most were her words. She told him things she'd never told me, how he made her feel alive, how she'd never been happier. She even joked about me, calling me boring and too predictable. I couldn't read anymore. I put the phone down and walked away, my vision blurred with tears. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out and stomped on it. But there was more. I could feel it, so I kept digging. Her laptop was next. She always kept it in the living room, open and logged in. I went through her emails, her calendar, her search history. It didn't take long to piece things together. She had been meeting him for months, sneaking off during the day while I was at work. They'd gone on trips together, weekends I thought she'd spent visiting her mom. She'd even used my money to book hotels and buy him gifts. By the time I was done, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. The betrayal was so much deeper than I'd imagined. This wasn't just an affair, it was a double life. When Laura finally woke up, she came into the kitchen, smiling like nothing had happened. "Morning, babe," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Did you sleep okay?" I stared at her, unable to comprehend how she could be so casual, so normal, after everything I'd discovered. It took everything in me not to explode right then and there, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. I needed a plan. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm fine." She kissed me on the cheek and sat down at the table, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. It was infuriating, but I played along, pretending everything was fine, all while my mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. I didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without a fight. That morning, as Laura went about her day like nothing had changed, I felt like I was watching a stranger in my own home. She hummed to herself while making breakfast, texted on her phone with that same sly grin I'd seen at the restaurant, and asked me if I could pick up some groceries on my way back from work. It was infuriating to see how seamlessly she balanced her lies with our life, but I stayed quiet. I needed more time to think. By the time she left the house for her yoga class, I had already decided that playing dumb would give me the upper hand. If she thought I was oblivious, she'd slip up sooner or later. While she was out, I got to work. The first thing I did was call Jeff again. I found everything. I told him, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and exhaustion. Messages, emails, hotel bookings. All of it. "Damn, Nick," he said. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm not letting her walk away from this unscathed. I need to figure out who this guy is first." Jeff paused for a moment. You need to be careful, man. This could get messy. Messy didn't even begin to describe it, but I appreciated the concern. After we hung up, I decided to focus on one thing at a time. If I wanted to confront Laura and this Mark, I needed to know everything about him. I started by going through Laura's text messages again. She had mentioned his name once or twice, Mark. It wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. Then I remembered something from her emails, a confirmation for a hotel reservation that included both of their names. My heart raced as I opened my laptop and searched for the hotel. Sure enough, there it was, a weekend getaway booked under Laura Anders and Mark Harris. I clicked on his name and found his LinkedIn profile. He was a corporate executive at some big marketing firm, mid-40s, flashy smile, the kind of guy who probably thought he was God's gift to women. Seeing his face made my blood boil. This was the guy Laura had thrown our marriage away for. But the real kicker was his profile picture. It wasn't just him, it was him and his wife. That's right, Mark wasn't just some random fling. He was a married man too. The hypocrisy of it all was almost too much to handle. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, trying to decide what to do with this new information. Part of me wanted to call his wife right then and there, but I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. I needed to be smart about this. Later that evening, Laura came home, glowing as usual. How was your day? She asked, dropping her gym bag by the door. Fine, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Busy. She nodded and headed to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. You should take a break once in a while, babe. You work too hard. Her words were like nails on a chalkboard. The audacity of her to act concerned about me while sneaking around behind my back was almost laughable. But I kept my cool. Instead of confronting her, I decided to test her. You know, I said casually. Jeff mentioned seeing you at Mario's the other night. Said you looked like you were having a good time. Her hand froze midair, the wine glass halfway to her lips. For a split second, her mask slipped. Oh, she said, her voice tight. Yeah, I was there with Vanessa. It was just a quick dinner. I nodded, pretending to believe her. Must have been nice, I said. You looked happy. She forced a smile. Yeah, it was fine. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She was lying, and she knew I was onto her. But instead of pressing her further, I let it go. I wanted her to feel safe, to think she was in control. Because the truth was, I was already planning my next move. That night, while Laura was asleep, I sat in the living room, going over everything I'd gathered so far. The texts, the emails, the hotel bookings. It was all there, neatly organized in a folder on my laptop. But I wasn't just collecting evidence for my own sake. I had a bigger plan in mind, one that would expose both Laura and Mark for the liars they were. I decided to reach out to Mark's wife. It was a risky move, but I figured she deserved to know the truth. I found her on Facebook, her name was Emily, and sent her a message. I kept it simple. Hi Emily, my name is Nick, and I think we need to talk. It's about your husband, Mark, and my wife, Laura. I have proof that they've been seeing each other. Please let me know if you'd like to see it. I hit send and sat back, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no turning back now. The next morning, I woke up to a reply. Emily's message was short but direct. Call me. I need to know everything. I stared at my phone, the weight of what I was about to do settling over me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about exposing the truth, no matter how ugly it was. As I dialed her number, I couldn't help but wonder how Laura would react when she found out her perfect little secret was about to come crashing down. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going to see this coming. When Emily answered the phone, her voice was steady but cold. Nick, right? She asked. Tell me everything. Hearing the pain masked in her voice, I realized she wasn't completely in the dark. Maybe she'd suspected something, just as I had, but hadn't been able to confirm it until now. Part of me felt guilty for dragging another person into this mess, but Emily deserved the truth. We both did. I took a deep breath and started explaining. Your husband, Mark, has been having an affair with my wife, Laura. I found their messages, photos, and hotel bookings. I don't know how long it's been going on, but it's serious enough that they've been meeting regularly. There was silence on the other end, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then I heard her sigh, a heavy, resigned sound that spoke volumes. I knew it, she said finally, her voice trembling. I've had my suspicions for months. He's been coming home late, making excuses, and guarding his phone like it's a state secret. I didn't have proof until now. I'm sorry, I said, though the words felt hollow. What could I possibly say to make this any better? Don't be, she replied sharply. This isn't your fault. It's theirs. Her resolve surprised me. She wasn't crying or begging for answers. She was angry, and that anger sparked something in me. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as I'd thought. Maybe, together, we could figure out a way to confront them. What do you want to do? I asked, testing the waters. Emily didn't hesitate. We exposed them. Publicly. The idea caught me off guard. Publicly? Yes, she said firmly. I'm not letting Mark walk away from this like it's nothing. He's humiliated me, lied to me, and destroyed our family. He doesn't get to hide from the consequences. I thought about Laura, about her smug smile and her endless lies. She'd been so sure she could get away with it. But she wouldn't. Not anymore. All right, I said. Let's do it. That afternoon, Emily and I began putting our plan into motion. We shared everything we had, screenshots of texts, email exchanges, and even the hotel receipts. She suggested we meet in person to strategize, so we arranged to meet at a coffee shop later that evening. When I arrived, I spotted her immediately. Emily was tall, with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked every bit as determined as she sounded on the phone. Nick, she said, standing to shake my hand. Thanks for meeting me. Of course, I said. I think we both need this. We sat down and laid everything out on the table, literally. Emily had printed out the messages she'd found on Mark's phone, and I'd brought my laptop with all the evidence I'd gathered. Together, we pieced together the timeline of their affair, which, as it turned out, went back almost a year. A year. While I'd been working late to provide for Laura, she'd been sneaking off to spend weekends with Mark. While Emily had been taking care of their 2 kids, Mark had been buying Laura expensive gifts and taking her to luxury hotels. The betrayal ran deeper than either of us had imagined. They think they're untouchable, Emily said, her voice laced with venom. But they're not. We're going to make sure of that. How? I asked, still unsure of what she had in mind. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We hit them where it hurts, their reputations. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly to finalize our plan. Emily created a folder with all the evidence, complete with a detailed timeline of their affair. We agreed to confront them at a dinner party Mark had planned for the following weekend, a party that Laura was also attending. It was the perfect setup. They'd be surrounded by friends and colleagues, basking in their own self-importance, completely unaware of the storm heading their way. As the day of the party approached, I could feel the tension building in our house. Laura was unusually chipper, humming to herself as she picked out a new dress for the event. She even asked for my opinion on which heels to wear, as if everything was normal. You're going to love this party, she said with a smile. It'll be fun. I nodded, swallowing the bitter taste in my mouth. If only she knew. The night of the party, I dressed in my best suit and watched as Laura got ready. She looked stunning, as always, but all I could see was the betrayal hidden behind her polished exterior. When we arrived at Mark's house, the place was packed with people. Mark greeted us at the door, flashing me a wide grin like we were old friends. Nick, great to see you, he said, shaking my hand. Mark, I replied, keeping my tone even. Thanks for having us. Laura beamed at him, her hand lingering on his arm for just a moment too long. It took everything in me not to snap, but I held it together. Not yet. Emily arrived shortly after, her expression cool and composed. We exchanged a subtle nod, our silent agreement to stick to the plan. The party was in full swing, laughter and music filling the air, but my focus never wavered. I was counting down the minutes until the confrontation. Finally, when the time was right, Emily and I stepped forward. The room fell silent as we stood in front of Mark and Laura, holding the folder of evidence like a ticking time bomb. Ladies and gentlemen, Emily said, her voice cutting through the quiet. We have something to share. The room went dead silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward us as Emily's voice rang out with unshakable confidence. My palms were sweating, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was the moment we'd been building toward, and there was no turning back. What's going on? Laura asked, her voice laced with nervous laughter. Nick, what is this? Emily stepped forward, holding up the folder. Mark, she said sharply, do you want to explain to everyone here why my husband's wife has been sneaking off with you for the past year? Mark's face drained of color, and Laura's fake smile shattered into a look of pure panic. The whispers started almost immediately, rippling through the crowd like wildfire. "This is insane," Mark stammered, glancing around the room. "Emily, don't do this here." "Why not?" she shot back. "You weren't worried about here when you were sneaking off to hotels or sending her these." She pulled out a printed screenshot of one of his explicit text messages to Laura and held it up for everyone to see. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Laura turned to me, her face pale. "Nick, please. Let's talk about this in private." I shook my head, my voice finally breaking through the lump in my throat. "Private? Like the way you and Mark kept your affair private?" "No, Laura. This is exactly where we're going to talk about it." She looked around, her eyes darting to the shocked faces of Mark's colleagues and her so-called friends. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, her voice trembling. "I can explain." "Don't bother," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've already seen everything. The texts, the emails, the hotel bookings. You left a pretty clear trail." Mark tried to interject, but Emily cut him off. "And you," she said, pointing at him, "have the audacity to stand here pretending to be a loyal husband and father while you've been lying to all of us? Do you have any idea what this has done to our family?" Mark opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He looked like a cornered animal, his usual smugness replaced by sheer terror. By now, the crowd was buzzing with murmurs. Some people were recording on their phones, while others just stood there, wide-eyed and stunned. Laura's hands were shaking as she reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said, my voice low but firm. "You don't get to touch me. Not anymore." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. Not after everything I'd seen, everything I'd endured. This was her moment to face the consequences, and I wasn't about to let her escape it. Emily wasn't done yet. She turned to the crowd and said, "For anyone who doubts us, we have all the proof right here. Feel free to take a look, because this isn't just a private betrayal, it's a public one." She placed the folder on a nearby table, leaving it open for anyone curious enough to read. The dam had officially broken, and there was no going back. Laura and Mark were frozen, their perfect little facade crumbling in front of everyone. For the first time, I saw them for what they really were: liars, manipulators, and cowards. "I hope it was worth it," I said to Laura, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Because you've lost everything." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving her to deal with the wreckage she created. I walked out of the house without looking back. The cool night air hit me like a bucket of ice water, but it wasn't enough to calm the storm raging inside me. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling, but there was also a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I wasn't living in the dark anymore. As I got into my car, I glanced at my phone. Notifications were already pouring in. Texts, missed calls, and voicemails. Most of them were from Laura. I didn't bother opening any of them. What could she possibly say? That she was sorry? That she didn't mean for it to happen? None of it would matter now. The drive home was a blur. My mind was racing, replaying everything that had just happened. I wondered how Laura was handling it, how Mark had reacted when I left. Were they trying to salvage their reputations, or were they too busy blaming each other for the mess they'd made? A bitter part of me hoped they were both miserable. They deserved it. When I got home, I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but too wired to sleep. My phone buzzed again, and this time I noticed a new name in my messages. Emily. "Emily, we did it." They're humiliated. Mark just stormed out of his own party. "Thanks for standing with me, Nick. We deserve this." I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "Me? They deserved it. Thanks for having my back, Emily. Let's stay in touch." It felt strange, this newfound alliance with someone I'd only met because of betrayal. But Emily understood my pain better than anyone else could. We were both victims in this mess, and we'd found a strange kind of solidarity in that. The next morning, I woke up to another barrage of messages. Laura was relentless, calling me over and over again. When I finally picked up, her voice was frantic. "Nick, please let me explain," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "It's not what I think, Laura. I have proof. I saw you with him. I've read the messages, the emails, everything. So tell me, what part of this am I misunderstanding?" There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But then she started crying. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. I was lonely, Nick. You've been so distant lately, always working. I didn't mean for it to happen. But Mark, he made me feel special. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was trying to shift the blame onto me, as if her betrayal was somehow my fault. Lonely, I said, my voice rising. I worked long hours to give you the life you wanted. I trusted you, Laura, and this is how you repay me? She kept crying, but I didn't care anymore. The tears that used to break my heart now felt like manipulation. You know what? I said. Save it. I'm done. I want you out of the house by the end of the week. Nick, no, she pleaded. Please, please, let's talk about this. We can fix it. There's nothing to fix, I said coldly. You made your choice, Laura. Now live with it. I hung up before she could say anything else and turned off my phone. I couldn't deal with her lies anymore. Not now, not ever again. By the end of the day, word of what had happened at the party had spread like wildfire. I started getting messages from mutual friends, some offering their support, others prying for details. A few even admitted they'd suspected something was going on between Laura and Mark, but didn't know how to tell me. One message stood out, though. It was from Vanessa, Laura's so-called best friend. Vanessa, hey Nick, I'm so sorry about everything. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. It felt odd hearing from her, considering Laura had used her as an alibi for so many of her girls' nights. But maybe Vanessa hadn't been as oblivious as Laura had led me to believe. That evening, I sat alone in the house that no longer felt like a home. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of Laura. Photos of us on vacations, her favorite throw blanket draped over the couch, the half-empty bottle of her perfume on the dresser. I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed a box and started packing. Photos, clothes, anything that reminded me of her went straight into it. By the time I was done, the house felt empty, but for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. As I sealed the box, I realized this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something new. Something I wasn't ready for, but something I needed. Laura's betrayal had shattered me, but it hadn't destroyed me, and that was a small victory in itself. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. Laura had left early, probably to avoid another confrontation. It was just as well. I didn't have anything more to say to her. My decision was final, and I wasn't going to let her twist the narrative to suit her. My first priority was meeting with a lawyer. I needed to protect myself, especially after finding out that Laura had been using my money to fund her affair. The thought of her and Mark enjoying expensive dinners and hotel stays on my dime made my blood boil. If she thought I was going to let that slide, she was dead wrong. I found a highly recommended divorce attorney, a sharp-tongued woman named Angela, who didn't sugarcoat anything. She listened patiently as I laid out the details of my situation, nodding as I explained the evidence I had collected. You've got a solid case, she said, flipping through the printouts I'd brought. The texts, emails, and financial records all paint a pretty damning picture. We'll use this to make sure she doesn't walk away with more than she deserves. Her confidence gave me a sliver of hope. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had some control over the situation. Angela assured me that the courts wouldn't look kindly on Laura's actions, especially since I could prove she'd misused marital funds. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, Laura came home while I was in the middle of packing more of her things into boxes. She stood in the doorway, her eyes red and puffy, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. Nick, she said softly, can we talk? I didn't look up. What's there to talk about? Please, she said, stepping into the room. I know I screwed up, but I don't want to lose you. Her words were hollow, and we both knew it. Still, I decided to humor her, if only to hear what kind of excuses she'd come up with this time. She sat down across from me, twisting her hands nervously. I don't know why I did it, she began. Mark was exciting, I guess, but he doesn't mean anything to me, not like you do. I couldn't stop myself from laughing, a harsh, bitter sound that filled the room. Doesn't mean anything, Laura? You've been sneaking around with him for a year. You've lied to me, stolen from me, and humiliated me. And now you're telling me it didn't mean anything? She flinched at my words, tears streaming down her face. I was stupid, okay? I wasn't thinking. But I love you, Nick. I always have. Her declaration might have meant something once, but now it felt like an insult. You don't love me, I said, my voice cold. You love the idea of me. The guy who works hard, pays the bills, and lets you live the life you want. But you don't respect me, Laura. If you did, this wouldn't have happened. Her tears turned into sobs, but I didn't let myself feel sorry for her. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up. You're going to pack your things and leave. I've already spoken to a lawyer, and the divorce papers will be ready soon. This marriage is over. No, she cried, reaching for me. Please, Nick, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. You should have thought about that before you cheated on me. It's too late now. Her face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she might argue, but then she nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Okay, she whispered. I'll leave. True to her word, Laura packed her things that night and left. Watching her walk out the door felt surreal, like I was finally closing a chapter of my life that had been weighing me down. But as much as I wanted to believe I was free, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. The next day, I got a call from Emily. She sounded more upbeat than I felt, which wasn't surprising. She'd already kicked Mark out of their house and was in the process of filing for divorce. Unlike me, she seemed to be thriving in the aftermath of the fallout. How are you holding up? She asked. Honestly, I'm not sure, I admitted. It feels like my whole life's been flipped upside down. It gets easier, she said. Trust me, once you realize you're better off without them, you'll feel like a weight's been lifted. I wanted to believe her, but it still felt like I was drowning. My entire world had revolved around Laura for so long that I didn't know who I was without her. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it was time to figure out who I was on my own. That night, as I sat in the empty house, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the life I'd lost, anger at the betrayal, but also a tiny flicker of hope. For the first time in years, I had a chance to start over, to rebuild my life on my terms. And that was a future worth fighting for. The days following Laura's departure were a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, and everywhere I looked, there were remnants of the life we'd built together. Her favorite mug still sat on the kitchen counter, and the closet was half empty where her clothes used to hang. I could have thrown it all out, but part of me needed time to process. Moving on wasn't going to happen overnight. I threw myself into work, partly to distract myself and partly because I needed to rebuild my finances. Laura's spending spree had left more damage than I realized, and it was going to take some time to recover. Angela, my lawyer, was already working on the divorce settlement, and she assured me that the evidence of Laura's infidelity would work in my favor. Still, the thought of hashing it all out in court made my stomach turn. Emily and I kept in touch. She was going through her own storm, but handled it with a level of composure I could only envy. Mark had tried to apologize, she told me, but she wasn't having it. I told him to save it for his next affair partner, she said, her tone dripping with disdain. We met up a few times for coffee, our shared experience creating an unexpected bond. It wasn't romantic, not even close, but it was comforting to talk to someone who understood exactly what I was going through. She encouraged me to focus on myself, to find things that brought me joy outside of work and relationships. You've got a clean slate now, she said one evening. Use it. Taking her advice, I decided to make some changes. I started hitting the gym, something I hadn't done in years. It felt good to take care of myself for once, to focus on my own needs instead of constantly worrying about someone else's. I also reconnected with old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years because Laura had always been my world. They welcomed me back with open arms, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a support system. One night, I went through the folder of evidence I'd collected against Laura and Mark. I'd been keeping it for the divorce proceedings, but seeing it again made my blood boil. The texts, the photos, the blatant disregard for me and our marriage. It was a painful reminder of how little I'd meant to her. I decided to delete everything. Not because I forgave her, but because I refused to let her betrayal define me anymore. Holding on to that folder felt like holding on to a wound that would never heal. Deleting it was my way of saying, you don't control me anymore. Weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. The divorce process was grueling, but Angela was sharp in the courtroom. Laura tried to play the victim, claiming that she'd been emotionally neglected, but the evidence spoke for itself. In the end, she walked away with far less than she'd hoped for, and I kept the house and most of my savings. The finalization of the divorce felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I didn't celebrate, There was nothing joyous about the end of a marriage, but I felt a sense of closure. Laura had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. I'd heard through the grapevine that Mark had dumped her not long after the party, and she was staying with a friend while trying to figure out her next move. Part of me felt sorry for her, but only a small part. She made her bed. One evening, I sat on the back porch with a beer in hand, reflecting on everything that had happened. It was hard to believe how much my life had changed in just a few short months. I'd gone from a man who put everyone else's needs above his own to someone who was finally learning how to put himself first. As I stared out at the setting sun, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. "Emily, how's this single life treating you?" I smiled, typing out a response. "Me. Better every day. Thanks for being there through all this, Emily." "Emily, anytime. You deserve happiness, Nick. Don't forget that." Her words stayed with me long after the conversation ended. For the first time in years, I believed them. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the life I had. And maybe, just maybe, it was the life I needed.